Just a fair warning before we get into this video, there will be spoilers for the new Alliance raid in patch 6.3 because that's what we will be discussing. So if you haven't done the raid yet and you don't want to see it before you do it for yourself, then click off this video and come back later. Hello and welcome back, goats, to the BigBluePurple channel. So if you saw my last video, you'll recall that I mentioned wanting to do a Day 1 Alliance raid. I'd missed the opportunity for this in 6.1, so with 6.3 coming around, I decided to make sure that I would not miss this opportunity. In this video, I'd like to talk about the new Alliance raid, Euphrosyne, and my first impressions from doing one run as soon as the patch dropped. Keep in mind throughout this video, this is all off of one run, a single impression on the raid. I think it would be more interesting this way, so I can go back and look at my opinions after they've changed from, grinding the raid on a weekly basis or whatever. Now, the maintenance for 6.3 ended around 40 minutes earlier than expected. That was a couple days ago. Thankfully, I was sitting there watching the server status like a fucking hermit, and I got to go on the raid as soon as it came out. I decided to put MSQ off till afterwards because I wanted to be sure that my Alliance raid experience was entirely blind. Because I got on the server so early, the whole group was 100% blind. There was no way anyone could have cleared within about 5 minutes of the servers going up. So let's talk about the raid. Firstly, the zone for the raid is absolutely gorgeous, right off the bat, starting with this vast open field starring Nophica. And Nophica is a super cool fight. She has one mechanic where these two circles are spawned. One is yellow and one is blue. This is kind of the main mechanic of the fight in the way that I see it. She does a sequence of like these yellow and blue attacks, and you just need to stand in the corresponding circle in order to survive. I actually really enjoyed how this mechanic was executed. It's not really anything groundbreaking, but it manages to feel unique and stick out despite just being a, stand on a plate to be safe from a mechanic. In terms of the Day 1 experience, this was definitely the fight where we had the most deaths. I probably died 3 or 4 times here. I really had no idea what was happening, and I was pretty fucking tired as well because it was 2 in the morning and I'd been up all night waiting for servers to go up. The crazy thing to me is that we didn't wipe a single time throughout this raid, despite how many deaths we actually had, so shout out the healers for taking care of that. Nophica is the fight that I probably experienced the least of all of the fights because I was dead the most amount of times in this fight. I still thought it was really cool for what I did experience of it, but overall I need to run this fight a couple more times to really develop my opinions on it. Overall, I really appreciate this first encounter for what it is. It's just kind of right there, right off the bat. There's barely any walking before you get there. Immediately gets the blood pumping, gets you excited, and it's overall a really fun encounter. Following Nophica, you get an even more brilliant view of the raid zone with some trash packs to just clear out and take in the sights of the raid. It's a pretty fast, trash pack clear out phase, and I like how it's placed after the first boss rather than before the first boss. So the next encounter is Althyk Nymia. This is a double boss, and it might be my favorite encounter in the raid, if not my second favorite right next to Halone, which we'll talk about in a bit. Nymia will place cards on all of the players that eventually proc a ice or fire debuff. These are handled like they're always handled. If you get ice, you need to move around, and if you get fire, you just need to stand still. But it's really nice how they pair this little mechanic with everything that Althyk is doing so that you need to avoid his mechanics and his swings while dealing with your card debuff. This encounter was very intuitive to me right off the bat. I felt like all of the mechanics were easy to understand after seeing them once, and the fight was overall just a very satisfying, dodgy kind of fight, which are my favorite kind of fights in this game, where you just need to kind of have good positioning and constantly be adapting to what's happening. For the Day 1 experience, the most stressful part of this entire raid is when I got this purple tether on me with a clock and I had absolutely no idea what it was doing, and it went off and I still had no idea what it was doing. I think it just made my card buff activate a bit earlier looking at this footage. I'm honestly not sure what the hell that purple tether did, but it got me very scared when I was the only player on the team with this big purple tether and I had no idea what it did. And this is exactly why I wanted to experience a Day 1 Alliance raid and a blind Alliance raid, because it's those little mechanics that when everyone knows what they're doing, you don't really notice them or care about them, but when it's the first time you've seen it and you're the only player being targeted, it just evokes this insane sense of fear in you, like what the hell is about to happen to me. I feel like in terms of deaths, this encounter went about as smooth as it could go for a day 1 experience. There were still quite a few deaths, but it was not nearly as many as the first encounter had. I think a lot of people started kind of getting in the zone and waking up a bit when they got to this encounter. I will also say that the mechanics in the Endwalker Alliance raids so far have been a lot simpler to me than the Nier raids or the Stormblood raids were. So the day 1 experience isn't nearly as hectic as I imagined those raids would have been, because a lot of the mechanics in these Endwalker raids are super intuitive, and you can kind of get them after the first couple times. I know some people probably won't be a fan of the fact that these Alliance raids feel like they're getting easier, but I think the Alliance raids are finding a really perfect balance between being an absolute spectacle while also being pretty accessible to everyone who plays the game. Althyk and Nymia were a very enjoyable double boss, and I think this is where I really started to feel super excited about this raid and was like, yup, this is just as good as Aglaia. And the raid only gets better as you enter the next zone. It is absolutely stunning in this like snowy castle-ass frozen fucking area. This place is beautiful as hell, and it is the coolest part of the raid in my opinion for sure. Just this whole environment, taking it all in. And the contrast that it has to the kind of first area of the raid, the tree and more like nature kind of area, it's a really cool duality for the raid, and it makes it feel super memorable and unique. There's another couple of trash packs in the zone you just need to clear out before you reach Halone. I don't think I'm alone in thinking that Halone is the absolute pinnacle and peak of this entire Alliance raid. Mechanically, visually, this entire encounter is fucking amazing. Mechanically, it very much reminds me of the Azima fight from Aglaia. It actually just feels very similar to me. I'm not sure if I'm the only one who feels this way, but the way the mechanics are executed and the way the arena is laid out very much reminds me of Azima. I really love those kind of sequential mechanics where the boss will throw out a couple of attacks and you need to memorize what order they're going to come out in. That's one of my favorite types of mechanics in this game to pull off dodging for some reason. There's just something so satisfying about memorizing a sequence in a very short amount of time and pulling it off flawlessly. In the footage you see here, I did not pull it off flawlessly. This fight really is the epitome of that nice, dodgy, fast-paced fight I'm always talking about in these games. A fight where everything is amply telegraphed and easy to avoid if you're paying attention, but very punishing if you are not paying attention. This fight was yet again very intuitive to me, and it made a lot of sense. And overall, Halone is a complete fucking badass and probably my favorite boss in this entire raid, at least from one singular run that I have done so far. After I get this video out, I'm looking forward to running this raid quite a few more times to grind out a gear piece that I want, and just to get my thoughts more fleshed out on this raid, so I can kind of look back at what I'm saying in this video and see if I agree with myself or disagree with myself upon, 10, 15, 20 completions. But as it stands right now, Halone has my favorite arena, my favorite mechanics, my favorite design, and is just overall my favorite encounter in this entire raid, and also my favorite encounter in any Endwalker raid so far, I would say. I'd also love to hear from you guys which encounter among these two Endwalker 24-mans has been your favorite so far. Do you think Halone is also the best encounter so far, or do you have another favorite? Let me know. I'm very curious. After Halone, there's this really cool ice skating section where you just skate along these motherfucking snowflakes all the way to the final boss. This shit is beautiful, and I love when Alliance raids just have little transitions like this between the encounters. It just makes them feel so much more exciting and like a big experience that you're raiding this place. The final boss of this raid is Menfina, and she is also just a really cool boss and a solid final encounter to this raid. I'm glad that she doesn't have any troll scale mechanic like Nalthal. As cool as the scale mechanic is in Aglaia, it is unbelievable the amount of times that people wipe there because they're just fucking around and don't stand on the right side. Despite being the final encounter, I feel like this was without a doubt the simplest fight in the entire raid. I never really felt confused as to what to do here, and the first time I saw every mechanic, I immediately understood what I was supposed to do after I had seen it once. The moon AoEs are a very simple mechanic to understand. You just need to pay attention to which moons are filling up first, and stay away from those ones before immediately rotating back to them after they explode. There's a short little ad phase where you just need to clear out these crystals before they fully charge the boss's limit break bar, I guess, if you would call it that. And then you have this cool little phase transition where she calls upon her hound to fight you, and then you fight the hound for the remainder of the encounter. This is kind of like a cool pseudo double boss where Menphina will show up and do a couple of attacks and become untargetable, and vice versa with the hound. I really don't know what else to say about Menphina. This fight went very smoothly on my first run. There were very few deaths in this fight compared to all of the other encounters in the raid, and everyone just kind of seemed to get the fight right off the bat, and it was super smooth. I don't really know if I can credit this to the raid just being much easier than previous Alliance raids, or if the team I got was actually just cracked out of their minds and really fucking good at the game. To be fair, it was, 5 minutes after 2 in the morning when the patch dropped, so everyone who was on was definitely a diehard fan, all things considered. But for a day 1 Alliance raid, this was a lot less hectic and chaotic than I expected it to be. Don't get me wrong, I still died a lot, and everyone still died a lot on a lot of these encounters, but there were no wipes, and the healers did a very good job at staying alive and keeping other people alive throughout the raid. Ironically, I think I struggled more with the normal trial in 6.3 than I did with this Alliance raid. The normal trial I could not wrap my head around the first time I was doing it. I genuinely did not understand how to deal with that one mechanic. If you've done the trial, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now that I've, done it a few times, I get it now, but god, that mechanic is confusing the first time you're there. It's also definitely necessary for me to mention the music in this raid, because god damn, man, they killed it on the music for Euphrosyne, whatever the fuck this raid is called. They killed it on the music here, okay? I thought Aglaya had killer music, because guess what? It does, but this raid has even better music, in my opinion. I love the music for the final encounter, but I also just love the battle theme that plays in each of the other encounters. It's super good, and this raid overall is an absolute spectacle. So all in all, that was my experience with the day 1, first 5 minutes of patch Alliance raid. It was a really cool experience. It was not half as chaotic as I expected it to be, but it was still really, really cool and something I have never gotten to experience before until now. This video was a bit more of like an unscripted thoughts type of video on just what I thought about the raid, so I know it may have not been as well produced as the last video I made, but I thought it would be fun to share my opinions on this raid regardless, and I would also love to know your opinions on this raid and Alliance raids as a whole in the comments down below. Let me know what your favorite Alliance raid is in the entire game, and between Aglaya and this new one, which one do you prefer more? Thank you for tuning into this video, and thank you for all the recent support on the last video on this channel. It's doing insanely well, and I appreciate you all so much for that. Remember to like the video, but only if you did, and enjoy yourself some patch 6.3.